Feathering is just the basic concept of applying paint into a certain area and then using your brush to pull that paint elsewhere around the model a little bit in that area. And because paint is got a level of transparency, especially with the layers that we generally work with, then you will create a gradient because the initial color underneath will show through. So depending on how thick you place it in a certain area, depending on how you're pulling it out, you can create, say, a nice gradient, which is very, very cool. And it's actually a very classic technique that a lot of people do in fine arts. With feathering, it's very important in the direction of how we utilize our brush. We can definitely leave unsightly marks in places, and so this definitely takes a bit more practice. I tend to find when I do feathering that I will apply a paint down in a certain area, and I may void my brush, which is the removal of paint. I might add a tiny little bit of water or maybe even a little bit of retarder to give myself more working time, and then I will start to pull the paint in a certain area to make sure that I am creating the appropriate gradient, and also with the retarder giving myself a little bit more working time to make sure that I do the thing that I want it to do. Speed is all the name of the game in this department. We apply the paint and then we quickly must work and pull and feather that paint out, creating a kind of glaze across that surface. One major thing that you've got to be careful when it comes to feathering is the brushwork that you're utilizing whilst feathering. As you pull it away and you lift your paintbrush off, you might leave a line, and that line will be unsightly. That line will make it not look like it's a seamless blend. And so you need to be aware of that, and it could partly be like, how do I avoid that actually is the major question that might naturally come to mind. Adding a little bit of water can help, just a little bit. You've got to be careful with how much of it you're utilizing because it will become poolish and then it will leave like a watermark, which you definitely don't want if you add too much of it. So you just want something to work with. And sometimes making sure that you pull it towards the, almost like you're pulling it away from where you applied the paint and then pulling it a little bit back towards the, to that original paint mark will make the transitions look somewhat more smooth. I personally don't use a ton of feathering. I tend to work, if I'm gonna do it, I tend to work in, say, a glaze, or I work in between a glaze and a layer, and I'm already applying it in a sort of thinner coat. When I paint like a layer and it's just a little too thick in a certain place, or I've applied too much of it, or I very quickly want to make a transition, feathering comes in really strong right here and now. So if I know kind of where I'm going, I can do it. I also use it as a way to fix mistakes. So the color comes down and then I will quickly add a bit of water, maybe removing the rest of the paint, and then I will try and effectively using like a horizontal, or not the tip of the brush, but more of the flat side of the brush, and try and pull the paint. And so I'm thinning it out over the model. It's a bit like creating a glaze on your palette, but you are doing it on top of the model. It helps to create transitions, which is very helpful, because if you're trying to get blended effects or try and have smooth blends, then again, very useful. But this is definitely one of those things you just need to practice with a little bit and get a sense of it and how it operates.